Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, David. No, that's great. And thank you all for being here. If you're at the last webinar, we called it Something Big is Happening. And I called this one Something Bigger is Happening. The amount of advancement that's happened in AI just over the last little while has been just incredible. So I'd like to talk a little bit about today about this acceleration and kind of what's happening and kind of give you a state of the union. So I'm going to present a lot of information. Just a little background for me, for people who don't know. I'm a senior partner at F&M Management, and we provide corporate advisory services to the environmental consulting and engineering industry. Also, one of the co-founders of the Canadian Environmental and Engineering Executives Conference. We invited those members to this webinar this year, actually, well, next year, our 2027 conference, our next conference, we're actually going to have a focused panel on AI and professional services. But, 2027 is a long time away. So we wanted to get some information out before the conference. And also, too, as David said, over the last few years, I've been doing a lot of work with AI as well. So, with that said, quick background. I want to get into the three topics I want to cover today. And again, I think I'm throw a lot of information out today. Hopefully, you find some of it interesting, some of it sticks. But just to give an idea of what I want to cover, the first thing is I want to talk about, and we kind of titled this in the webinar, I want to talk about the 60 days that changed everything. And I put that in quotes because it might not mean what you think it means. The next thing I want to talk about is what I call the AI stack. So everyone talks about AI, but I don't think a lot of people have a good grasp of what it is or how it's built. So I kind of want to give like the typical structure of an AI system. So when people are talking about models or these different components, you actually understand how this goes together to build work. And the last thing I want to talk about is kind of the state of the union from all the frontier labs. This is critical because the things that these companies are doing are really impacting the way we work, dramatically impacting the way we work. It's kind of an example of that. I want to talk about a quote that Andrew Karpathy gave. And this was a tweet he did on Boxing Day of last year. Now, a lot of you are wondering, okay, who's Andre? Well, he was a student of Geoffrey Hinton in his neural network class at the University of Toronto. Now, people are saying, who's Geoffrey Hinton? Geoffrey Hinton is considered the godfather of AI. He was did research in the 80s on neural networks, and it's his research are how models are trained today. And in 2024, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in physics for his foundational work in AI. So Andre was a student of him, and he made amazing contributions to both computer vision and natural language processing in the academic world. But he was also one of the co-founders, and he formerly worked at OpenAI. He was one of the creators of the first versions of ChatGPT, and he worked on a number of projects at that company. He left OpenAI and actually became Tesla's director of artificial intelligence. And he was behind the computer vision systems that go into Tesla's autopilot and full self-driving systems. So when you go online and look at just these incredible YouTube videos of like in the last month of a Tesla starting out in the middle of Vancouver and driving to a busy Costco with all the people walking around the parking lot and parking completely autonomously. It's his work that built those systems. He left Tesla a few years ago and has just become a an instructor. He has YouTube videos. He teaches about AI, and he was one of Time Magazine's most influential people in AI. So why do I give all this background on this person? Well, here's his tweet. I don't want to read some of it. Again, this was Boxing Day of last year, so December 26, 2025. And what he said was this: I never felt this much behind as a programmer. The profession is being dramatically refactored as the bits contributed by the programmer are increasingly sparse and in between. And what he means by there is that AI is writing the software now, not him. And he says, I have a sense that I could be 10 times more powerful if I just properly string together what has become widely available over about the last year. And a failure to claim the boost decidedly feels decidedly like a skill issue. Now, this is amazing. This is one of the lead researchers in the world of AI, and he feels behind. I just want to read the last couple of sentences. Clearly, some powerful alien tool was handed around, except it comes with no manual, and everyone has to figure out how to hold it and operate it while resulting in a 9 magnitude earthquake that is rocking the profession. Roll up your sleeves not to fall behind. And I think, this really captures it. As I talk to a lot of professionals over the last few months, people are just kind of overwhelmed with the changes. And that is the right position to be in because even the creators of AI have been overwhelmed at its capabilities. So, what is this last 60 days that changed everything? Well, basically, the last 60 days is the last 60 days from now. So, what's happening is that a lot of our professional workflows that you've developed with AI are being obsoleted on around a 60-day cycle. Means that, if you created something 4 or 5 months ago, it's probably obsolete by now. The pace of change is incredible. So that's kind of my central thesis of this part. So we have this point where our workflows now are obsolete, becoming obsolescent on a 2 month cycle. So if your firm is like running an AI workflow that was designed before December 2025, you're not a quarter behind, you're a generation behind. And it's the companies um, that are pulling ahead aren't the ones with the best long-term AI plans. They're the ones running the cycle the fastest. So if you look at kind of AI over the last few years, a couple of years ago, AI was a project. So a lot of companies had identified, okay, AI is becoming a tool, and they looked at developing projects where we can use these tools internally. As AI capabilities progressed, a lot of companies developed AI strategies. So a year ago, it was a strategy. How is our company going to take advantage of AI and use it in our workflows, not to fall behind? But today, AI is a tempo. And it's really changing so fast that it's hard to have a strategy around it. And I know it sounds crazy, but again, the experts in the industry feel like this that they can't keep up. So there's a gap between professionals and firms that understand this and the firms that don't, and it's widening every week. So the ones that realize, oh, we need to be assessing our AI workflow on a constant basis and changing things at an individual level, those are the companies that are really going to succeed in the next year or two. So, just an idea of this pace of change. So, Anthropic is the company that makes Claude, and they've been in the news a lot lately. I think a lot of people had their first introduction to them just a few months ago when they popped up in the news, but they've been in the AI game for a few years now. But in the last 60 days, excuse me, a 60-day period, about a month or two ago, these are the amount of tools that they released in just a 60-day period. And it was phenomenal. Like it changed so many things that we do. For example, the first one, Claude Cowork, is basically a professional services equivalent to their Claude Code model, which is the programming agent. And this is the agent Andre was talking about, saying, this thing's incredible. It's doing my work for me. Well, they realized that the programming agent is really a general agent and can do more than just programming. So, from the idea that they had is saying, why don't we take this programming tool that's in the command line and make it available for professionals doing work so they can help it write proposals or work on bigger projects? It took them just 10 days from that idea of doing that to releasing the product. And they were able to do that because they used AI to 100% program that tool, right? And it's just amazing what it's done. And I could go through a lot of different items here, but just to note a couple, Claude in PowerPoint and Excel are game changing. If you use those applications, they're just incredible. Another thing at the top of the second list, a few months ago, they released some skills for Claude, right? That taught it how to do investment banking, to do wealth management, right? They had financial plugins for HR and private equity. And they just released all these for free, saying, hey, this helps the model do this analysis. Well, the day they released that, the financial community went crazy that evening because people started downloading these plugins and realizing that these AIs can do serious financial work and stuff that will replace juniors in this company. The next day, the stock market crashed. Like it was a big wake up call to see what can happen in professional services. So the pace of changing is really quick. Another thing, just to give a snapshot, speaking about Anthropic, is the amount of compute that they're delivering AI with, right? So we look October, November of last year, their compute was kind of flat, but then at the end of November, they doubled their compute. And that was getting prepared for the Opus 4.5 model, which again is that programming model that Andre was using. They knew that they needed more compute for that model. Well, the work both in programming and professional services, use of Claude has exploded. So from November to the beginning of April, they tripled their computing capacity again, which is incredible. And then going from April 6th to April 20th, they again nearly doubled their computing capacity. And they just announced in May this month that they have a deal with SpaceX to add more computing capacity. It's a small sliver there, but actually it's a $15 billion agreement with SpaceX because SpaceX is actually building data centers. And with this incredible growth in compute, they are compute constrained right now. They're having problems with their latest Opus model because it can throttle its ability to think. And because they're so compute constrained that the model's actually a little bit dumber because they don't have enough compute to provide to everyone using the model. One other interesting thing about this phenomenal growth in this chart you see, talking about compute, is compute's not measured here by the number of processors that they're using, by the amount of floating point operations per second that they're doing, or even by the amount of AI tokens they're processing. Compute here is measured in power, in gigawatts. The reason is power is the limiting factor now for data centers. Everyone talked about the chip shortage. That is not the issue going forward with data centers over the next few years. It's power. So if you're anywhere in the engineering space, environmental space, if you work somewhere in the industry, power is the new gold rush, right? And it will become incredible. Just for example, like you look at these numbers, what do they mean? Well, Anthropic right now is at 11.5 gigawatts of compute power. That is nearly the entire power for the province of Ontario that they're using for their data centers and what they need for compute. And all these other companies have similar type of scales of data centers, and these are going to grow exponentially. So again, power is the new gold rush coming in the next few years. And just talking about this 60-day release cycle, I just kind of looked, okay, what happened in the last 60 days? And there were just all these incredible announcements that, I think people get flooded with AI news, and I think the impact gets lessons. But looking back just 60 days ago, there were some amazing models shipped by Google. Meta announced a pivot to closed weight models. I'll talk about that later because that's a huge difference. There were some new flagship models released. I talked about new reasoning tiers for both Grok and GPT-5. Just incredible capabilities released in April with these models. So if you're using these models day in and day out, like, wow, they can do a lot more than I could do just a month or two ago. And of course, we had Anthropic announce their compute capacity, not only what they are doing now, but the growth and the deals that they've had. And again, this was just in the last 60 days. It's kind of changed your plans for 2026. And what's going to happen over the next 60 days will probably be just as incredible. So As a professional, what does this mean for you? Well, just a few examples of, what's happened over the last few months. These models now, given the compute, given how intelligent they are, they can work for autonomously on work for long periods of time. So both the coding agents and agents that do professional work can work for hours independently. So, for example, for programming, tasks that took a developer like a week to finish now kind of complete overnight. And the programming field has completely changed where developers are now running multiple agents. So they have multiple agents doing their task, and they're just managing those agents. Um, in the professional services, as I mentioned, when Anthropic released that financial analysis tool, they realized that the document analysis is just incredible with these models. They can do very good analysis across hundreds of pages, right? It's completely changed the way that people analyze and read documents. And when it comes to document production in professional services, we generate reports or proposals or slide decks. Those now are done by agents autonomously, right? You give them a brief on what you want and you give them the source material. The agent will go out and do research, structure the drafts, formats, and it can do very high quality documents in minutes and hours, right? And what happens for the professional is they shift from a writer to an editor and reviewer, like they get a promotion. And this is kind of happening right now. Now, there are issues with this. It's not perfect. We all still have jobs, and I'll talk about some of the issues a little bit later. But and these are not easy issues to solve. So even though these models are so great, they still take review. But the amount that they contribute to workflows and speed up workflows is something that is real. So I talked about these 60-day capability shifts and, just some examples of, kind of before and after over a 1 or 2 month period. It was just like early last year that models were only be able to reason, these agents could only reason for seconds, 90 seconds, a couple minutes before they got themselves kind of into trouble and weren't producing useful work anymore. Today, models run for hours or days autonomously, and that's growing exponentially. There's some benchmarks that mark this, and I've talked about this in a previous session, but it's amazing how long these models can work independently. Um, Previously, models required individual code to connect to systems. So if you wanted your AI to do something useful, like talk to a database, go through your email, even do things like connect to a calendar, run code, each model kind of required custom systems. Anthropic released something called MCP, which was Model Context Protocol, which was basically a universal language that models could talk to tools, and this has been widely adopted. There's tens of thousands of these servers now, so models can actually do useful things. Um, Before a model actually using your computer, clicking the mouse and stuff, was a research demo. Within the matter of 2 months, that went into production to many systems. OpenAI has it, Anthropic has it, and many other companies have systems that can actually run your browser so the model can actually use your computer. And finally, again, I'll talk about this before. This just happened last month. Meta, who is a champion of open source models, meaning that I can actually download the model and run it on my computer, they've switched to doing closed weight. And I'll talk about the impacts of that a little bit later, but it's a huge shift. So things are changing really, really fast, is the point. And kind of I'll summarize this at the end. But if you are comfortable, if you feel you know what's happening, you're probably not paying attention to the news because even the experts feel overwhelmed. And if you feel overwhelmed about what's happening with AI, you're probably in the right space. So the next thing I want to talk about is the stack, because everyone is talking about AI, and I don't think they have a good picture of what these systems are or how these models are used. So I just want to give you kind of a simple 4-layer mental model of like how these AI systems are built. So, talking about these 4 layers, there's the base layer, right? And this is the model, right? This is the large language model that all this model does is take a bunch of text and predict the next word. It's actually tokens, but I'll use text for now. You can think of it as text, right? So it has, whether you give it from a prompt or it's an agent in a system, this is the reasoning engine of the model. It's the smarts, right? And what's important is it sets the ceiling is how well everything else will work is all dependent on the base model. And that's why there's such focus on these base models. And I'll talk about the leading models at the end when I talk about the State of the Union from the Frontier Labs. So we have the model, that's our brain. On top of that is we have the data that goes into the model. That's called the context. That's the system prompt that you're giving the model. It's giving it any documents it's retrieved or you're providing, and ways, and there's a bunch of different systems that kind of manage that memory and context. But you can think of it as garbage in, garbage out. If you're giving it bad information, you're probably going to get bad information out. But it's so important to how well the model works. So it's important to give it good information and understand what context is, especially in the AI system that you're using. The next layer is the tools, and I talked about that before. So it's just not what the model says, instead of just seeing the output and text from GPT or Claude, it's actually, can the model search the internet? Can it execute code? Can it do database queries? And these model context protocol servers are huge because it gives the models tools. It gives it the ability to do things and do useful work. So those are very important. And finally, the last kind of layer is the application layer. This kind of wraps everything up, and this is what you see. So you may be using Claude Cowork or Claude Code, or it's the chatbot that you're using. It wraps everything up into an application, right? And this is what you see at the end of the day. But you have to realize that these layers underneath it that are powering it. So why the stack matters? Well, let's say you're being pitched a product to your firm. Someone comes in with a very good AI tool that helps you write proposals or reports, right? Well, this tool is built on those layers, right? So, and the vendor will just generally show you the top layer. Here's the product, here's how it works. But the reliability on how well that works is in the layers underneath, right? And it's actually that bottom layer, the model layer, that sets the understanding. So the model actually sets the ceiling is how smart it is. And most of these AI systems, these are swappable. You can change the models anytime you want. You can, change the model from Google to Anthropic's model, or change it from GPT to Meta's model. So they're swappable. And so it's important to realize that, because your vendor may sell you something, and then all of a sudden, because of economics, they might put in a model that's just slightly not as good, but far cheaper, and it will affect the final product you have at the end of the day. Of course, that next layer is the context is determines the answer. So important. Garbage in, garbage out. So even though you have this application you're looking at, you really have to be conscious of what information you're putting in to the system. And again, what tools, how does this model interact with your systems, with other systems? And finally, that application layer is what the user interacts with. So when you're looking at AI systems and tools, or you're hearing about AI news, it's important to think of these layers and how AI is built. And I want to talk a little bit now just about where the failures actually happen with AI. And there's lots of failures. And this is, again, the reason that even though there's some great progress in it, there are issues. And this was from research done by MIT and others looking in failures. And they said, where 65% of the failures happen is not mostly because of the model, but it's connecting the plumbing, those layers together. There's issues with that, right? And that takes a lot of work on people building these AI systems. And the rest comes from just misunderstanding what the model can do. A lot of people don't understand how fragile these models can be in their intelligence. It's something that's called the jagged frontier, meaning that these models can be incredibly smart at doing things. As I mentioned, doing these financial analysis, they do it amazingly well, But then you realize that 90% of the context was uh, dead on in this report, but it hallucinated 10% of it. It just made it up. And the AI companies are struggling with these hallucinations to get rid of them. Or just even another thing, you can have a model that can do, you come up with a new mathematical theorem, and this has already happened. So leading intelligence, but the same model can't tell you how many R's are in the word strawberry. So that's what they call about this jagged frontier. So even though they're very, very smart, their intelligence is sharp in some areas, and they really fail. The other thing that's happened, and it's because of this pace of development, is 95% of the projects at big I companies never go live and they have zero return on their investment. And the problem is generally how the model is set up, but it really has to do with the development cycle. People are developing systems that get tested for months, developed for months, and by the time they go live, they're already obsolete, right? Because things are moving so quickly. So it is very difficult to both kind of understand where the failures of a model are and to kind of come up with a new paradigm, a new model to integrate into business. And that's kind of the failures right now with AI. So I wanted to talk now. I mean, it's a lot of information, but it's really important to kind of understand these base models and these companies that are providing these models, because these models are the foundation for everything that's happened with AI. And they're the ones that's going to be solving these problems. They're building some of these tools. And it's very important that you pay attention to some of these key labs going forward. I call them the masters of layer one, the model, right? And now these companies include obviously OpenAI and Sam Altman leading these companies. And the reason I put the executives and CEO of these companies there, because they do have so much power. You can imagine that, if someone like Sam Altman said, you know what? I want all the responses from GPT to be slightly more left-leaning politically or right-leaning politically. He can do that. And literally, a billion people will have their answers slightly changed. Like it's incredible the power that these people wield, right? And these companies yield right now. But it's also important from our professional services to understand what they're doing because they're greatly impacted. So, and Sam Altman's a very controversial character once you get into him. Another company and person to be quite aware of is obviously Google, and that's Demis Hassabis. And he's the founder, actually, of a company called DeepMind. Very interesting. You can go on YouTube. There's some great documentaries on the work that he's done in the past. Very smart person in the field, very moral person, I think, at the end of the day. But very interesting to watch what Google has been doing with their models. And I'll talk about them in more detail in a sec. Obviously, there's Dario Amodei. He's the CEO of Anthropic. Anthropic has just exploded in the last few years, and actually in the last few months. And for people who don't know, Dario Amodei and his sister were both at OpenAI. And Dario is the lead person that put GPT-2 and GPT-3 together. And he had a split with Sam Altman. Sam Altman had promised him that safety would be important, and Dario is very concerned about AI safety. So, as part of the agreement, is they said 10% of their compute resources would be dedicated to safety testing the models, and Sam Altman defaulted basically on that promise. So, after GPT-3 was developed, Dario said thank you very much and started Anthropic as a competitor. Elon Musk, love him or hate him. And I think maybe a lot of people are on the second part of that right now. But he has been very foundational. He was actually he funded OpenAI when it had started. Now there's some big lawsuits going on, but not to be ignored what he's been doing with XAI, now bought in SpaceX. And I'll talk about his models later on, which are actually quite good. And again, frontier bottom model. I'm going to talk a little bit about Mark Zuckerberg and what they've been doing with Meta AI. There's this pivot from open source to closed source, and it's going to impact many, many people. And finally, I wanted to represent what's happening in China, and I've just picked Liang Wenfeng to kind of be that leader. He's the founder and CEO of DeepSeek, and I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what's happening with AI in China. So we'll talk about that as well. So what's happening with these companies right now? Well, looking at Google, their flagship model is Gemini 3.1 Pro, and it is one of the smartest models out there. It leads something called the GPQA, which is Google Proof Question and Answers Reasoning benchmark, excuse me. And what that is these models are trained on the internet, right? So if you can Google an answer and you're asking a model to do something, it's probably has that in its memory somewhere. So this benchmark isn't on scientific and mathematical problems that are not found on the internet. So the model actually has to reason to solve them. And Gemini Pro is one of the best reasoners. Now, so it's a very good at deep research as well. So it has strong research capabilities. So if you have a project that involves looking through lots of documents or doing lots of research, this is one of the best models to use to do that. And it's also multimodal, which means it has strong capabilities in video, audio, and for images as well. And if you're using Google's ecosystem already, use Gmail, Google Docs, all those tools, it's integrated deeply with those. And kind of where to watch for the next little bit and where Google's going. Well, it was interesting. They just had a big product released on Tuesday of this week. And they announced an incredible programming model, Gemini 3.5 Flash, new programming environment update to their anti-gravity. That is their version of Claude Code or GPT Codex. They released a new AI agent, personal agent that people can use. I believe it's going to be coming out next week that you can have run 24/7 and integrate with your Google apps. And they also announced deeper MCP support for their Google apps, meaning that, if you're using Claude, if you're using ChatGPT, it be able to work with Google apps much easier. So it was amazing. With Google, if you research news a year ago, all the stories were about how behind Google was, and they lost the AI race. And even previously to that, their model Bard was considered a joke, right? So they were off the map. But then all of a sudden, late last year, they released the first version of Gemini 3.0, and it caught everyone off guard because they went top of the leaderboards, and people were shocked. So shocked that at OpenAI, Sam Altman wrote a memo, and it was called All Hands on Deck. It was a red alert memo saying we can't believe Google has moved this quickly. We have to even move faster. So it's really sped up the pace and the competition. And speaking about OpenAI, um, this is what I find that most people, at least a few months ago, equated with AI itself, right? GPT or ChatGPT was AI, and that's what people thought it was. They would open generally in their browser, and they thought, okay, this is AI. It's just one model. But OpenAI has not stood still. They released their flagship model again just in April. And it's an incredible model, 5.5, the space layer. They have one of their own kind of benchmarks, this GDP val, and basically it benchmarks the model against work a human can do, and how much of that work could the model replicate of what a human worker could do at a terminal. And right now, their benchmark sitting at 85%, which is incredible. Now, it still makes mistakes. That last 15% is very, very hard to get, but their flagship model is incredible. And kind of what they're best at is volume and versatility. So their revenue right now is 25 billion. They have the largest user base globally, and maybe that's why a lot of people align OpenAI, ChatGPT with just AI itself. And outside of Copilot and Microsoft, it really is the default for general business use. A lot of people have their personal ChatGPT accounts that they use at business to help them get work done. What to watch for is probably later this year, it's coming out, but there's going to be a public offering and it's going to be at an unprecedented scale, $1 trillion IPO. And this money is required because they're burning money at an incredible rate, both in compute for running the models, but training the models. So if you look at ChatGPT 5.5, the training run, the amount of compute just to train that model was $1 billion, right? GPT 5.6 is in training right now, and there's rumors about the next, larger model coming, GPT 6. And that training run, people are estimating could be in the tens of billions of dollars to train that model. So the amounts of money, again, the power we're talking about in the future's incredible. So the company that has come up on everyone's radar recently is Anthropic, and I've been using the Anthropic models for years now. I think I switched over to my preferred model to Claude about 2 years ago, but really in the last few months, their growth has been exponential. Now their latest model is called Opus 4.7. It's a programming powerhouse, and it runs Cursor and Windsurf are development environments, and it's the preferred model in that. They also have their own harness, which is Claude Code, which is that programming environment again that Andre was talking about at the beginning. They have smaller models that are cheaper to run, but they're still very good. So they actually have three versions of their models: Haiku, Sonnet, and Opus. Haiku being the small version, Sonnet being the medium version, Opus being the large version. They have different versions because these models are expensive to run. And a lot of times you don't need the smartest model to do simple tasks, right? Um, they're best at enterprise reasoning. So they've been dominating coding, but lately they're dominating these agentic workflows. These are these professional services workflows, creating reports, writing proposals. Their models are very good at that. And amazingly, they're backed by Amazon and Google. So Google not only has their own um, path forward, but they actually are an active partner with Claude as well. And what's amazing is that they've caught up to uh, OpenAI in revenue. So their revenue last year was 19 billion, which is just amazing. Yesterday, they announced that this quarter, which ends in June for them, is going to be a $10 billion quarter. They also announced they're going to be profitable this quarter, which is incredible. So when people talk about an AI bubble, that's not what's happening. Like it's just not happening. They're building solid foundations, right? Going forward. The other thing is their growth has been so exponential that if they continue on the same growth path, within 2 years, their annualized revenue will be equal to the global GDP. Now, obviously, they can't keep growing at that pace, but the company has been growing phenomenally. So, what to watch for is they are also going to have an IPO coming out. Again, not only from investment purposes, but they need money to build and buy compute. And Anthropic actually doesn't build their own data centers. They rely on others to provide those data centers. And as I just mentioned, they announced this incredible capacity. Again, the amount of compute, the power required for basically the province of Ontario is what they're using right now, and they're compute constrained. So they're going to be buying a lot more compute capacity in the future. Interesting thing that just happened. So at the beginning of my presentation, I talked about Andre Kaparthi, and he's been working independently for a couple of years. So I finished the slide deck Tuesday this week and Tuesday afternoon, and I went online. And then as soon as I finished the slide deck, I read this tweet by Andre, and that he's announced he's joined Anthropic. This was huge news in the industry because he is such a major player. And it says a lot about where Anthropic's going. But I talked about this jagged frontier, these issues with the models kind of breaking through and becoming truly smart. He's, one of the keys to maybe breaking this, and he's joined the research team at Anthropic. So that's just kind of big news. It just happened the other day. Now, a lot of people don't realize that Elon Musk and XAI, they have their own frontier model. And again, Elon was one of the founders and initial seed funders for OpenAI. Obviously had a terrible split and even court battles going on right now, but he decided, you know what? I'm just going to build my own AI. And that's what he did. He founded XAI. Their current model is a model called Grok 4.3. It was just released last month. It's an incredible model. And they have some packages. They have monthly packages. You can pay $30, $40 a month. They have a super heavy package, which is like $300 a month. But one of the interesting things about this model has some of the lowest hallucination rates. And they've done incredible things to do that. So when you're using Grok Super Heavy and either Grok 4.2 or 4.3, what happens is within that model, there's four agents. There's a planning agent. There's an agent who's very good at research. There's agent that's very good in science and math. And there's a fourth agent that's creative, but asking questions. So when you're asking this model something, it spins up these four agents to do the work. And that final agent is basically asking, is that the right answer? So it's quite interesting how they're solving this problem of hallucinations. But um, Grok is really, and again, very, very powerful model. And one of the things they're doing is giving it real-time access to information, which is incredible. That means models are kind of frozen when they're trained based on their training date. So if I stop training my model at the end of last year, it doesn't know anything that's happened since then. XAI's models are different. And just quickly, SpaceX acquired them. The big thing about that is SpaceX is building data centers as part of the thing that they're doing, both on the ground and proposed in space. But this is going to be huge coming forward. To quickly follow up, I just want to go quickly what's happened with Meta AI. The big thing that I talked about is they released a closed weight model last month, and really their path forward is closed weight models. So what does that mean? Well, before they were training the Llama series of models, which you could actually download the model itself and run on your computer at home if you had a big enough computer, and there were still smaller versions. But it was part of the open source community. And a lot of companies who didn't want to give their data or wanted to keep their AI private would download this model and run it locally. So you could run it completely offline. And Meta was spending tens of millions of dollars in training these models and giving them away for free. Well, Mark realized that this isn't going to work. He actually needs to close the model and start generating revenue so he can spend not tens of millions, but billions of dollars in training to catch up. So this new model they've released, it's great for visual reasoning, but it's embedded now into WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, and Messenger. So not a big impact for business, but a big social impact. And it's really kind of new, so it doesn't have any good coding tools. There's no good API, and it's not as smart as the other models. But the two things to kind of realize about this story is that pivot is really going to change. It leaves a big vacuum into these open models where you can publicly access them, and a lot of people are going to be using this model. So there's this big vacuum in the open space community, open source community, and the Chinese are filling this. And just one example is I want to give of DeepSeek. And I think everyone heard about DeepSeek a year or two ago when they released one of their models, and it just competed so well, and no one expected that. Their current version is DeepSeek 4 Pro. I won't go through a lot of the details, but this is an open source model, meaning I can download the model and it's released under the MIT open source license. This is one of the most flexible and open licenses you can get. You can basically do anything with the model. All you have to do is if you have a product and you're quoting the model or copywriting it, you just have to note them in the copyright, and that's it. It's very good at coding. It's one of the best coding models out there, but it does it at a 7 times lower cost than the other frontier labs, and it's self-hostable. And things to watch with DeepSeek and the other Chinese companies like ZAI or Moonshot. that these models are a little bit behind on reasoning, but they're catching up. And there seems to be all these political, geopolitical considerations. Oh, these are Chinese labs, but really the Chinese labs are the most open. They're the ones sharing the research. So when they release DeepSeek V4 Pro, they also release the research papers on exactly how they built the model, and the other Chinese companies are doing this as well. This is not what's happening with the other frontier labs. So they're the most open. So again, they're trailing behind right now in the frontier for the reasoning, but you have to watch out for these Chinese companies because I think they're going to catch up. So I just covered so much. I just wanted to bring as much as I could to the table today of information of kind of what's happening in the space. But kind of a summary is that 60 days that changed everything. It's the last 60 days. So hopefully that really gels with you, realizing that if you feel like you're behind, that's the right place to be in. Talked quickly about that AI stack so you can kind of visualize what these systems are like. And again, the state of the union of the frontier labs. And I can't express enough how important it is to stay aware of what these companies are doing, the products that they're releasing, because it's these products that will greatly impact the professional work that we do. So the professionals pulling ahead in 2026 are not the ones that are locked in the one model or chasing their in-house builds. They're the ones testing the frontier continuously, knowing what each model is best at and treating this AI as a tempo, not a tool. They're feeling like I'm behind and I need to catch up. So, just a couple final notes before I hand it back to David. One, for the people here that are from the environmental and engineering profession, we're going to be talking about our next conference coming up in January 2027. We're going to have a panel dedicated to AI, and we're seeking also a keynote speaker to talk about it. So, if you haven't registered yet, register early for the conference. We sold out last year. We just opened registration. Early bird is open and it's actually filling up quite fast. So I encourage you, if you're a president, CEO in the industry, to register for the conference. If you work at a company, then bring this attention to your executive team. It's a great place to be, but we'll be talking about AI at that conference. And the last thing I'd like to mention is this course that I built. And David had been bugging me for a long time that we need to do something more in AI training. So we piloted a course 2 months ago called AI Professionals. So what it is, it's basically a 3-session course. Each session is 2 hours long. And we basically tell you how, as an individual, to use these tools. And the course is done in 3 parts. So the first session is just understanding AI. It's understanding that model, that base layer. What is a large language model? How is it built? Why it works? Where it fails? The whole 2 hours is just on that. So you can get a really good understanding of that. The next session is, now that you understand this model, is how do you work with it? And we give some habits on working with those models and show how you can use AI in a professional workflow, and how you can do it safely. That is, ensuring that you understand what hallucinations are, where it makes those mistakes, and what you have to do. And then finally, at the end of that session, we actually uh, ask students to do an assignment, use it in your workflow. And then in the third session, we review those work that the students do. And then we talk about the current tools and how to stay up to date. So we do it in the course over 3 weeks, 2 hours each week. Plus, after we're done, we do an hour in office hours. And we're going to start the course next week. It's great though, because if you can't make it at the course times, we do record them so you can do it offline as well. And that's all I had. David, I'm just going to hand it back to you. I know that was a lot of content for 50 minutes, but
Yeah, just got some. Thank you very much for that, Leroy. A couple of things. If you're interested in the course, Leroy and I were talking before. We put a coupon there. Um, it'll be good tomorrow to midnight. And if any of you signed up prior to this, because we just put this coupon out, I'll be reaching out to you to give you the $100 off. So if you paid full price, so if you want to save $100, please use that coupon. The second thing is we have a bunch of alumni on here, Leroy, and I know you and I talked about some of the alumni want to do it again. So if that is you, just send me an email and I'll talk to Leroy. Obviously, we'll try to get you. We'll figure out an alumni price if you want to. There's a lot changing. I know some of you might want to do it again. And there were a couple questions, Leroy, on. Oh, and just one more thing. When you sign up, you'll then get a link to register. It's as Leroy said, it's going to be from depending on your time zone, but 10 Mountain to for 2 hours, and then we have an open office hour. So it's a lot of fun where we just come off screen. It's more of a coffee, and people are just asking the questions like you're seeing in the chat here. And so, Leroy, one of the questions, if I can turn to that now, was around Copilot. It seems it was noticeable that you didn't talk about Copilot. So, where are you at with Copilot? I think that would just summarize the
Yeah,
questions.
Copilot. I left Copilot out specifically because really Microsoft is not one of these foundational labs. So just as an idea, if you're trying to keep up with AI, um, uh, all the programmers at Microsoft don't use Copilot. They're using Claude. They actually had a mandate saying, "Hey, you got to start using Copilot," and all the programmers pushed back because Claude was a better system. Microsoft has now started implementing things like GPT in the Office, Claude in Office, because it's so much better and powerful, right? So don't get me wrong, Copilot can do great things. There's ways to build little agents to go through your emails, but it's not at the frontier, right? They are definitely not at the frontier. And if you want to be at the frontier, Copilot is comfortable for companies because it's the old system. It's the IT system. Microsoft has been promoting it, right? But I take it to someone who is selling typewriters, right? And they come to you and say, "Oh, I have an electric typewriter to give you." Meanwhile, all the other companies are selling word processors at the moment. So Copilot is a bit behind in general, right? It's an easy way to get started with an AI, but if you want to be at the frontier and where all the companies are really doing interesting things, it's not with Copilot right now. And I saw another question from Mark just
Yes.
about the agentic buzzword. So actually, the agentic buzzword has been around for a couple years, and it is important. What basically simply an agent or the agentic cycle is that, when you go to ChatGPT, you ask it a question and it gives an answer. The agentic cycle takes things in larger chunks. So what it does is it will go through and the model will ask itself questions. And the model will start planning steps and doing those steps on its own. So that whole layer system that I talked about, there's a cycle, and that's the agentic cycle. And it's really the application that's controlling that. MCP is just part of that cycle. So I can have an agent connect with um, tools to use, right? But that whole kind of layer system is the agentic cycle.
There's one more question.
Oh, and I saw Russell just about
Yeah.
security. So the people selling and promoting Copilot talk about security, but really the companies, the enterprise level applications or the paid applications are really just as secure. Microsoft has all your data. Anyways, so does OpenAI, so does Anthropic, right? And they have enterprise level accounts, right? Your data's in the cloud. It's very similar. Think the issues before that were around the free versions, right? People would start using the free versions and not realizing that you give data to a free version of the model, you don't have an account or a paid account, they take that as training data, right? So if you upload a client's report into the free model, they might be using that as training data, right? Whereas when you're using the paid versions of these models, the enterprise versions of these models, um, The default now is for privacy, where they're not trained on that data. So so I think the worries about, like Russell said, is overstated if your company's not, if you say, oh, we need to use Copilot because of data security. And actually, if you look at the news, there's been some fantastic failures of Microsoft and Copilot when it comes to security in the last few months. Another reason to maybe look at other potential solutions. And I guess my point is, um, you should not be locked into any one solution. If you're going to be kind of at that frontier, you need to look what all the other companies are doing and test out their applications, because if you look back to when Cowork was released by Anthropic, what it could do was phenomenal and just blew anything that Copilot could do out of the water.
Leroy, we've got let's end with one question that I think is pretty important because I'm seeing it as well. It's like hallucinations. Like it's kind of crazy, right? Like you're doing this, they seem perfect, and then they're making stuff up. So maybe just why don't we end on a kind of a common hallucinations, please, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, it's a fundamental flaw in how LLMs work. And again, I'll try to explain it in 2 minutes, but basically the first 2 hours in that course, we go to it in detail on how the models work and actually why they hallucinate and why there's these problems. But LLMs don't store facts, right? Every answer, the best way that I've heard it, and actually Andrej Karpathy had talked about that, you can think of an LLM as dreaming up an answer. So when you're giving it information, it literally dreams, right? And these models are very creative. So the dreams can be creative. Now, if you give it the right context, give it enough information, its dreams are very accurate. It's dreaming with accurate information, but it doesn't understand the difference between what's accurate and what's not. And fundamentally, they are creative, right? You tell the model, write me a story about this, it will write an incredible story. So if it's lacking information, it will make up information. So in the course, we kind of teach about how that happens and how to prevent that as much as you can in the tools that you use and why you need to check everything that you do because it's that.
Okay, thank
Um,
you.
oh, and I see Todd's question there this quickly. Crystal ball, when we arrive at sentient AI, should we all be worried? Um, Todd, potentially, yes, is potential answer. I talked about Jeffrey Hinton at the beginning. The godfather of AI was given again, the Nobel Prize in physics. He was embarrassed for getting that because he's not a physicist, but they didn't know what else to give him. So they gave him that award. Look at his videos online. He left Google so he could talk openly about the potential issues. Another thing that when it comes to, sentient AI, or when people talk about the singularity or AGI, Demis Havisas from Google, just in the Google presentation that was 2 days ago, releasing all their things, he ended with, when it comes to the singularity, when computers are just getting infinitely smarter than us, he says, I think we're at the foothills right now, looking at the mountains of the singularity. So it's coming.
Well,
Yeah.
well, thank you very much, Leroy. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off? I just want to respect everybody's time.
No, the only thing is, I'm hoping to do another one of these in a month or two and maybe select a topic like MCP or a topic like hallucinations or something, a specific topic to do. So if people want more, we'll do more of these webinars for sure.
Okay, that's great. Well, thanks everybody for coming today. The link is in the chat there if you're interested in taking the course. We'd love to see you. And I'll also send it out in an email tomorrow as well with you. And thank you very much for coming by. And Leroy, always like you're such a gift to people, educating them on this. So thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you for putting this together, David.
Thanks. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.